Welcome to this AOS-CX 10.13 update. As you can see, it's around the NAS-Filter enhancements, support for layer 4 port ranges with IPv4 and IP fixed filter rules used with radius servers, and the platform support, as you can see here, which is most of the CX portfolio. I'm Steve Bartlett. I'm a technical marketing engineer supporting CX switching. And another reminder relating to the feature support aligned to the platforms for the NAS-Filter enhanced port ranges. As you can see, the emissions here on the 8320, 8100, the 8400 and the 9300. So NAS-Filter rule. So what is a NAS-Filter rule? So it is an acronym for a network access server. And in that context, it provides an access service for a user connected to a network. And in the context of NAS and network access, the NAS filter rule or rules are used to define policies and control access to network resources. The typical attributes are username, source IP address, protocol and port, and time of day. So the NAS filter rule determines whether the access request is allowed or denied based on the defined criteria. So NAS filter rules obviously play a key part of the radius authentication and authorization process, and they determine the level of access a user should have on the network. And the radius server can use VSA, vendor specific attributes. And VSAs are vendor-specific attributes that allow for the inclusion of vendor-specific information and formats in radius packets. So VSAs are used for additional attributes or information that are specific to a vendor. So Aruba has its own set of VSAs, and one of the attributes is the Aruba NAS-Filter rule, which is the focus of this enhancement for multiple port ranges. So on to the enhancement overview. As part of a port access policy, network administrators can define a set of rules. These rules are used to restrict or alter the passage of network traffic for clients onboarding to a switch that has port security enabled using a 2.1x or MAC authentication, or a combination of the two, of course. And port access policies are associated roles. So based on the role associated with the user, after authentication, the policy is applied to that user. And Aruba CX switches can obtain policies from any of the following sources. So we have local policies configured locally on the switch, downloaded policies. This is using the ClearPass Policy Manager server, for example. And generic radius policies configured using the NAS filter rule or the Aruba NAS-Filter rule radius attributes. Of course, these filter rules can be used by ClearPass as well. And the feature enhancement now allows for multiple layer 4 protocol port ranges and multiple protocol single ports for IPv4 and IPv6 addressing in a single rule using the Aruba NAS filter rule attribute, with the Aruba CX switching using a radius server. So IPv4 and IPv6 rules require their separate respective rule entries, and we'll take a look at that in the configuration guidance. And here again is the platform support across the CX range. So let's take a configuration example, and do remember this configuration is entered directly onto the radius server within the Aruba NAS filter rule, and the syntax that's going to be presented is applied to that Aruba NAS filter rule. They're not applied directly to the Aruba CX switch. The whole process is dynamic. The entries are downloaded from the radius server and then applied to the CX switch as part of the authentication process from radius. So before the enhancement, a single source and destination port range only per rule was allowed. So in this example, in the NAS-Filter rule, a deny inbound TCP from any IPv6 address, because this is an IPv6 rule, and here is a source port range, and that was the only source port range or source port you could put in if you wanted to just put a single source port in, targeting a destination IPv6 address, and likewise only a destination port range was allowed. If you wanted to have multiple port ranges for a source port as part of the rule, or destination port ranges, multiple ranges, you had to apply a separate NAS-Filter rule. So the step change after the enhancement is multiple source and destination ports, multiple ranges supported per rule, and this makes the whole process that much more efficient and flexible. So here we have, as an IPv4 rule, permit inbound UDP from any IPv4 address, and you can have individual ports separated by a comma, still use the port ranges or multiple port ranges, in this case from the source port range, targeting an IPv4 address, and again the same syntax process can be applied to the destination ports, where you can have individual ports separated by a comma and multiple port ranges as part of that rule. And again for the IPv6, the same methodology applies. So here we've got a deny inbound TCP from any IPv6 address, and we've got two ranges as part of the source port range. We've got 50,000 to 51,000, 52,000 to 55,000, targeting an IPv6 address, and again we've got multiple ranges targeting the destination ports. And just note, a separate rule is required for IPv4 and a separate rule is required for IPv6. So let's look at the resource and usage with Radius and the CX TCAM, and this obviously the output that I'm going to show you will vary depending on the platform that you are using. So first of all, the Radius policy derive can have up to 128 entries in a single class and up to 128 entries in the policy. The maximum number of NAS-Filter rule attributes in a single Radius access accept frame can be the number of rules that can fit inside a single Radius packet, 4 KB, or 128 entries, whichever is lower. And note that the Radius servers might truncate rules if the Radius frame goes beyond 4 KB. So the switch will mark such roles as invalid, and clients associated with such a role will be unauthorized on the switch. The Radius policy is a type of the port access policy and consumes TCAM entries based on the entries configured. So the VSA NAS-Filter rules are converted to a single Radius policy. And the policy class entries are stored in the database and TCAM for the lifetime of the user session. So this is the output from the CX 10.13 switch, and of course the available reservations for each policy type will vary depending on which CX platform you're on. But if you use the show resources, you can see the ingress layer 4 port ranges at the bottom there and the consumption of those resources. And that brings us to the end of this very short presentation. I thank you for tuning in.